Okay, gentlemen, put the women and children to bed because Saturday, October 15th at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York, we've got two big boys, Deontay Wilder and Robert Helenius, one-on-one. Conventional wisdom suggests that the winner of this will probably most likely get a fight with Usyk, Fury, Joshua, maybe even Andy Ruiz. Every cliche that there is to be said about heavyweight boxing can be used, every superlative. Wilder was last seen in his defeat in one of the most incredible heavyweight bouts of all time in his trilogy with Tyson Fury. Robert Helenius coming off of 3 consecutive TKO victories, none of which have gone past round 6. This one is going to be very, very interesting. So first things first, Dan, boxing aficionados like yourself will know all about Robert Helenius. But for those of us a little less familiar, why don't you set the table and give us the 411 on the Nordic Nightmare?
Well, Robert Helenius, as you say, nicknamed the Nordic Nightmare, from Finland. He's a big man, so he's going to look Deontay Wilder in the eye, about 6'6", probably going to be a little heavier than Deontay Wilder. But Robert Helenius, when he was first coming up, was a phenomenal prospect. A lot of people thought when he was a young contender that he was going to be a formidable opponent down the road for then champion Vladimir Klitschko. He had scored victories against former title holders like Samuel Peter and Layman Brewster. And granted, those guys were a little bit long in the tooth at that time. But he had everything it looked like to be a serious heavyweight contender and perhaps a heavyweight champion. He got derailed. He had a severe shoulder injury that needed surgery that knocked him off track. He then suffered some upset losses. He lost to Dillian White. That wasn't so much the upset. Down the road, he lost to opponents such as Johan Duhaupas and Gerald Washington. Both guys who got knocked out by Deontay Wilder in WBC title defenses. And so Robert Helenius was sort of like, he'd become sort of this journeyman guy, a good fighter, but you know what, not good enough to hang with the best guys. And now all of a sudden, here comes Adam Kownacki, the Polish undefeated rising contender who was in line to get a shot at Deontay Wilder. His team thought, you know what, let's take on a guy like Helenius as they're staying active. And they were heavily favored. Kownacki was to beat him. He got upset in the Barclays Center in front of Adam's hometown crowd. He got knocked out, and that was a big upset. And they ended up doing a rematch. Now, it took like over a year to get the rematch on, and that was largely because of the pandemic had delayed so many different things. So he had the rematch with Helenius. That took place on the undercard of the fight you mentioned, the third fight, that great fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. And guess what? Robert Helenius pulled the upset again and knocked out Adam Kownacki. So he had won 3 straight fights. He's coming off 2 big upsets, one against Kownacki, and he was undefeated and in line to fight Wilder for the heavyweight title or a heavyweight title. And now with Deontay Wilder having lost his third fight, the trilogy fight against Fury, and in need of a legitimate opponent, but obviously he wasn't in position to fight for another title. Robert Helenius, they came calling. So Helenius's point of view is, I'm going to pull that upset magic once again, and take on Deontay Wilder. But they're 2 big guys, and nobody really knows what Deontay still got going on with him after taking a vicious beating in that loss against Fury in the last fight. Got knocked out in the fight before that by Fury. So no one's quite sure what he's got left. And Helenius claims that for the first time in many, many years, that his shoulder is 100%. He's healthy. He feels good. He's confident, and is going to give it his best shot and see if he can pull another upset.
It's certainly a very intriguing matchup, and you've done a fabulous job there of setting the table down. Appreciate that. So, Curran, let's expand on that. Let's talk about the tale of the tape. And the first thing, obviously, that stands out is size. I mean, these are 2 bona fide heavyweights. Let's talk about how these guys match up physically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic matchup in the heavyweight division to see where both men are at. A fantastic measuring stick fight. You mentioned the tale of the tape. Robert Helenius, 6'6.5", 38 years old. Deontay Wilder, 6'7", 36 years old. They match up nicely there. They're also sparring partners, so there's a history there, right? This isn't going to be a situation with one guy coming into the ring having no idea what's coming back at him. So that's why I think it's going to be a fantastic matchup. And just to touch upon the matchup itself, the one word I would use to describe it is momentum, and I'll tell you why. Robert Helenius, right? He upset Adam Kownacki twice. Before that, he had a knockout win as well. So he's coming off 3 straight knockout wins within 6 rounds. He's having a career resurgence here. And Deontay Wilder, you're probably going to ask me, how is he going to be coming off momentum when he took 2 losses to Tyson Fury? I'll tell you how. The second fight, Wilder basically didn't have a chance against Fury. For the third fight, Wilder bulked up. He knocked down Fury twice. And if Fury stayed down for a few more seconds, he could have won that fight. So in my win, that's Wilder riding momentum. We know that after that fight, Wilder took some time off. We didn't know if he was going to retire. He's decided to come back to boxing. And everything I've seen, this is the Deontay Wilder of old. No matter what, Deontay Wilder is one of the most electric fighters in the heavyweight division. And that's because he has an over 91% knockout percentage. That means if you're in the ring versus Deontay Wilder, 9 times out of 10, he's going to knock you out. And that's why I think this is a fantastic matchup for both men on October 15th.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other point that I would add to that is between the second and third Fury fights, he also changed trainers to Malik Scott, and I'm certainly not qualified to say about what in particular they did, but clearly whatever they did worked, because yes, he took a savage beating from Fury in that third fight, but he also knocked down Fury a couple of times himself. And I mean, when you talk about heart, I don't know if anybody, we've all seen the personality of Deontay, right? I mean, when you talk as a promoter, he's a promoter's dream. I mean, the size, good looking, great physique, he's got the gift of gab. And like you said, he knocks people out, and it's thankfully, with Tyson Fury being the personality that he was, they come along at the same time and they match up, and all of a sudden Deontay Wilder is, in terms of box office, kind of where he deserved to be all along. Because I think prior to the Fury fights, people were looking at this guy and going, how is this guy not a giant box office draw? Because when you compare him to the heavyweights of different eras, he's got everything. He ticks all the boxes, but for whatever reason, he just wasn't being talked about in that same vein as a sports personality. But now he is. Having said all that, he's coming off of this Fury fight, which obviously we can talk about to death with every superlative there is to use, but it was a physically demanding bout, but it was also for him, I think, a very psychologically challenging situation, because he clearly put all his eggs in that basket, clearly wanted to, desperately wanted to get that W over Fury, doesn't get the job done. Doesn't necessarily show the best sportsmanship afterwards. Kind of disappears, kind of snubs Fury, and and of course after the second fight he on a bit of an excuse-a-thon about my gear was too heavy and this and that. Coming off of all of that, we've seen a huge amount of pride from Deontay. So coming into this fight, and I guess I'm posing this to both of you, do you expect him to want to win, or does he want to make a statement? And I'm sure that you understand what I'm saying when I ask that.
Well, Deontay Wilder always wants to make a statement. So for him, it's always about not only winning, that's obviously first and foremost, you got to get the win, but it's about making a statement, because he wants to prove that he should get another chance to fight for the title, that he's still the same old Deontay Wilder that we've seen for, the past decade, knocking everybody out. And it'll make him feel good. Deontay Wilder has been the distance only in the fight where he won the title in the first place against Bermane Stiverne in 2015, who he then erased in one round in a mandated rematch a couple of years later. And the only other guy that ever he went 12 rounds with in a fight was the draw that he had with Tyson Fury in their first fight. And obviously he was stopped in the other 2 fights. So the only time he's ever heard the final bell was a draw with Tyson Fury and a title victory that he won by knockout in a rematch. So he's always looking to get the knockout, and knockouts make statements. And Deontay Wilder is one of the most devastating punchers, I believe, in the history of boxing, period. His right hand is second to none. I don't care who it is. You want to talk about the greatest punchers of all time, talk about Ernie Shavers and George Foreman and Mike Tyson, and you pick a heavyweight, I'll put Deontay Wilder's right hand up there with any of them. And obviously, Robert Helenius has been stopped in previous fights, not recently, but he has had knockout losses. And that's what Deontay Wilder's looking to do. And if you score the knockout, that's a statement. And that's why you want to watch him, because, win or lose or draw, frankly, Deontay Wilder brings something special to the table, and it makes it entertaining for the fans, in my mind.
The thing
Yeah,
about
it's
Deontay Wilder on the way up, to answer your question, Nick, about if he wants to win or make a statement, I'm going to definitely say make a statement. And I'll tell you why. I think all of Deontay Wilder's career, there was a lot of questions about, is this guy the real deal, right? When he was coming up, he was knocking out every single opponent. Well, then it was like, can he do anything else? Or is it just the right hand, right? Is this just a gifted fighter who has a right hand? Then he outboxed Bermane Stiverne. He went all 12 rounds using the jab, worked behind the jab. So he added that to his arsenal. But if you want to take one fight that I think encompasses what Deontay Wilder is, I would say it was the rematch with Luis Ortiz. And the reason for that is it was a close fight in terms of punch stats. It was 35-34, right? But it was that final punch that Deontay Wilder landed that knocked out Ortiz, big right hand. We call it the great eraser because it doesn't matter what happens beforehand. It's the great eraser. And I predict that Saturday night, we're going to see the great eraser back because I think this is Deontay Wilder's moment to put himself back into the top of the heavyweight division, be back in the mix. This is what he's been working towards. He took the Fury fights extremely seriously. He bulked up in weight. He wasn't able to beat Tyson Fury. Fury was just the bigger man. He could do more things in the ring. That's okay. Fury is at the top of the division. Wilder can be 1A to Fury's 1. And I think this is his opportunity to do that. And I expect to see that on Saturday night.
I'm glad that you guys both touched on this, and Dan in particular, when you mention some of these names from the past, because one of the questions I had here was, is Wilder the victory? Because I think there's a very valid argument to be made that he is. Case in point, I was listening to Lennox Lewis kind of give his take on the fight, and before he talks about anything else, when they ask him about the keys to victory for Helenius, the first thing he says is avoid the right hand. I mean, it's like,
that's like saying you're going on an airplane. What's the key to a safe flight? Avoiding the crash.
Right. Right. Don't plummet to your death. But, then he goes on to say, get the jab going, be confident from the outset, which I thought was an interesting thing to say, because obviously, again, it seems very obvious to say that. But Deontay Wilder, because of that eraser, is so intimidating. It is such a weapon, and I can only assume that going into a fight with Deontay, every fighter, even Fury, as skilled as he is, and maybe the greatest heavyweight in terms of skill ever, but you're talking, I mean, you have to be going into that just with this constant, awareness and fear of this thing that's just, on the end of his arm, that that if it touches you, you're going down.
Listen, Robert Helenius knows that. I mean, he has spoken about it in the pre-fight when people will ask him about his experiences of sparring with Deontay Wilder. One thing about these guys is they're friends with each other. Doesn't mean they don't want to compete and win and knock the other guy's head off, but they're very friendly with each other. They've spent time in the camp together. They've sparred a lot of rounds together. And while Helenius, makes the point, he says, "Look, it's sparring. It's not the real fight. We're wearing bigger gloves. We're wearing headgear." He knows. I don't care if you're wearing bigger gloves or you're wearing headgear. If you're taking right hands from Deontay Wilder, even if they're not full blast and he's going with the effort to knock you out, that the man has punching power. And also, don't make any mistake. It's not like Robert Helenius has the punching power like Deontay Wilder, but it's not like he's a pity pat guy also. He's got a lot of knockouts on his record also. And Deontay Wilder has been knocked down, obviously, by Tyson Fury, a multitude of times over these last few fights. So, again, that's not necessarily what most people think will happen, but you cannot write that off completely as a possibility, because this is a big man also with good power. Maybe not the level of a Deontay Wilder punching power, but Deontay Wilder, when he fights, it's like, Curran said, he has the great eraser. And in that second fight that he mentioned against Luis Ortiz, Deontay Wilder lost every single second of every single round, except for the one time when he landed the shot in about the 8 or 9 seconds before the ref waved off the fight. So it doesn't matter what the scorecards read. If Deontay Wilder's still standing when the fight's coming to a close, he can end the night. And that's the whole thing about him. That's why they call it the great eraser, because, and this is to parrot a phrase from Deontay Wilder. My opponent has to be perfect the entire fight, meaning you got to stay away from the right hand and not get caught and all that. Deontay Wilder's response to that, while my opponent has to be perfect the whole fight, I only have to be perfect for a couple of seconds, meaning I need just a couple of seconds to land that big shot and I can end the night. And that's one of the reasons why I've said this for a long time, even before the Tyson Fury fights. Win or lose, at the time he hadn't yet lost, Deontay Wilder just is simply, if you're a boxing fan, he's a must-see guy. You have to tune in because you just have no idea of how it's going to happen. But the expectation is that at some point, someone's getting knocked out. It either
Right.
is going to be the opponent, or in the case of the Fury fights, the two of the three of them, it's going to be Deontay Wilder. But either way, folks, they leave their seat, or they leave their TV screen, or their laptop, or their phone, or whatever device they watch it on, satisfied with what they've seen. I mean, if you like heavyweight boxing, Deontay Wilder is the epitome of what you want to see. He's either going to get knocked out or he's going to knock you out. He brings a lot of spice and electricity to the fight, and what can you say? That's what boxing fans
He's
want
a
to see.
promoter's dream. I'd say the guy's a promoter's dream. I mean, you take all of those things, and then the fact that, right, like you said, he's going to go in guns blazing. No question about it. And like you said, he can basically get whooped for the whole fight and then still win with just that one shot. I mean, and I don't know how many heavyweights that we've seen in the last couple of decades that you can say the same thing about. But I want to touch on one thing. Referencing, I watched the Fury trilogy, and the second fight was the most one-sided of the three. And Fury said that coming into that, after he got knocked down with obviously the very famous, in the first fight, and he sat up, and everyone thought it was over. Even Deontay thought it was over. Fury said in that moment he realized something about Deontay, which was that he needed to pressure him, he needed to bully him, bully the bully. Helenius is known somewhat for being a pressure fighter. So having watched these and obviously sparred together, do you think that that's the key to victory for Helenius, to put the pressure on Deontay, getting close? I remember one of the commentators using an analogy of, if someone's got a rifle, but you can't use it if you storm them too quickly before they get a chance to pull the trigger. Is that what we expect to see from Helenius, Curran?
Here's the thing you have to know about Deontay Wilder. Every single opponent that he's faced has tasted the canvas at some point, right? It might not have been in the first fight, it could be in the second fight or whatever it is, but every single man. And to your question about Robert Helenius and his game plan in this fight, right? Robert Helenius is also no slouch. He comes from that Viking background. By his own words, he says, I was born in the wrong era, right? I should be on the front lines as a Viking. That's what this man embodies, right? Right now he's training in Sweden in the Åland Islands. He's from Finland, and this is in his blood, competing. And to your question about the best game plan against Deontay Wilder, I do think that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see an aggressive Robert Helenius, because that's what we saw when Robert Helenius took on Adam Kovnowski. Adam Kovnowski is a volume punch guy, and Helenius was able to blunt that offense with offense of his own and come straight at Deontay Wilder. I do think that's what Robert Helenius is going to do on Saturday night. The only thing I would say about that is I actually think that's going to play into Deontay Wilder's favor, right? I think Deontay Wilder is going to find the openings. I think it's going to be a highlight reel knockout, the way that it was against Dominic Breazeale and Stavern and so many others that you could go all the way down the line. I think Wilder is going to be comfortable at Barclays Center. He's fought 4 times there before. He's won every single one of those fights by knockout. And I expect to see the same thing on Saturday night. A game Robert Helenius, but that gameness may play into Deontay Wilder's hands.
Yeah, and the Barclays Center, is known for being one of the most electric buildings in the country for boxing. It's really developed a reputation, across wrestling as well, and across all combat sports, for having a phenomenal atmosphere. The fans in Brooklyn are rabid. I think it tees up very, very well for a guy like Deontay, because I feel like he's a guy who feeds off of that energy and uses it to sort of really, to pull the trigger when the time is right and close the show. Having said that, let's table this for a moment, and we'll close this with your predictions for how you see the fight going and results. But before we do, there's a very interesting fight. As a co-main for this, Caleb Plant and Anthony Durrell. Plant's had a lot to say about Durrell and has a point to prove, coming back from his only defeat at the hands of Canelo Alvarez. So Dan, do us a favor and kind of give us the 4-1-1 on this Plant and Durrell fight.
Sure, it's a real quality co-feature for this pay-per-view card. The two bigger name guys, meaning Wilder and Plant, they're the guys who are coming off of losses in their last fights, but in excellent fights, in game performances. Obviously, Fury beating Wilder, but in the case of, as you mentioned, Caleb Plant's most recent fight, which took place not quite a year ago, he got knocked out by Canelo Alvarez. They were meeting for the undisputed championship at 168 pounds in the super middleweight division. Canelo came in with 3 of the belts. Plant had one of the belts, and it was a good fight. Canelo, was better obviously on that night, but Caleb Plant gave a great effort, had some moments in the fight, just was not enough to stand up to who at the time Canelo Alvarez was pretty much universally recognized as the pound for pound #1 fighter in boxing. He took his loss. He's coming back after, again, not quite a year off. He's made some changes in the past less than a year. He's changed trainers from his longtime trainer Justin Gamer. Now he's working with Stephen Breadman Edwards, who has a great reputation as a tremendous boxing mind, as a guy that really knows the nuances. Probably best known at this point for having been the trainer for Julian Williams, who had been a unified champion in the junior middleweight division. He also took some time off because Caleb and his wife welcomed their first child, the daughter, in August. So obviously he was taking some time to get to know his daughter and enjoy the family. Obviously, he had made a tremendous amount of money against Canelo. It's not like he had to get right back in the ring, but he's still hungry. I had an opportunity to do an interview with Caleb Plant for my podcast about a week ago. He's in great spirits. He's excited for the fight. He doesn't have too much particular love for Anthony Durrell, but it's a good matchup because both of these guys are looking to get back on top of the mountain. He's been a super middleweight champion. Anthony Durrell is a former two-time super middleweight champion. Durrell is coming off of a very impressive knockout against Marcos Hernandez that took place on the undercard of Caleb Plant's loss against Canelo Alvarez. So they're on the same time schedule. So he has that going for him, even though he was in a little bit of a rut before that with a draw and a loss. But the main thing is they at one time both held titles simultaneously. They didn't hold them long enough at the same time for there ever to be a unification fight. So now they finally meet after having had words with each other over the last few years. And it's got some significance because it's a WBC elimination fight. The winner of the fight is going to move one step closer to a mandatory opportunity to get back in the point where they want, which is another world title opportunity. And so I think it shapes up like a pretty good fight. You got to look at Plant as the favorite, but Anthony Durrell has given a lot of guys trouble, and he's had some good wins over the course of his career. It's a good matchup between two, I think, evenly matched super middleweights.
Agreed, and Plant, has had plenty to say, as I'm sure that you can attest to, having had him as a guest on your podcast, and even going as far as calling it a tune-up fight, which sometimes that can turn around and backfire on you, right? It's not a tune-up fight. He knows that, and I think we all understand it's gamesmanship, but for a guy like Anthony Durrell, that might just be the last little piece of the puzzle that he needs to go, okay, I'll show you a tune-up fight. I'm very excited about that too. I think it's an excellent co-feature, but let's go back to the main course. All right, gentlemen, I guess I'll go first, and then I will throw to you guys for your predictions for how you see the fight going and ultimately the result. Having sort of watched some Helenius bouts and sort of seen the journey that Deontay Wilder's taken, I think that the trilogy with Fury was what has kind of completed Deontay as a fighter in that respect. I think that, like you said, Dan, he'd had so many bouts that he'd never gone the distance apart from the one time. He had, I think, maybe gotten a little comfortable as I'm gonna knock this guy out. It's only a matter of time. I think that the Fury trilogy has created a more balanced approach for Deontay, and now he's been forged in the fire. So I think that having come off of that trilogy, he's got that different level of sort of mental conditioning now. Because again, the other thing you have to talk about is that in terms of publicity and pressure and attention, the Fury trilogy, particularly the third bout, that's a whole different level to anything he had done before. And I think that does something to you. I think it puts that last little piece of sort of solidity, in what you're in as a fighter. He's ready for the pressure. He's ready for the moment. And I think that he's talked openly about sort of how much longer he has left, and he wants to sort of finish this back nine with, I think he wants to do it with some class and with his trademark Deontay Wilder style. So I think we're going to see a good fight. I think that Helenius is going to have a good showing, but I think Deontay is going to finish him in about the 6th or 7th round. So Dan, let's go to you. Predictions for Wilder and Helenius.
Well, I tend to agree with what you're saying, Nick. Look, the Fury fights definitely took something out of Deontay Wilder, mentally and physically. Mentally, it feels like he's back where he's supposed to be based on the way he's been talking after contemplating the retirement, deciding that, and after seeing the love and the outpouring from the people in his hometown of Tuscaloosa at a ceremony dedicating a life-size statue to him. He was very moved by that. He said, you know what, I have to come back for these people. I'm going to give it my best for the next few years, and decided to make that return. So I think mentally he's back in a good place. Physically, I guess he's okay. I don't think he took the kind of career-altering damage necessarily against Fury, even if it was a lot of punishment. But he's had now, it'll be a year to take care of that. So I think he's in a good spot, it seems to me. And Robert Helenius has been on a good roll, but he's been on a good roll because he has been fighting fighters like Deontay Wilder. So all credit to him for the upsets against Adam Konaski. But with all due respect, Adam Konaski is no Deontay Wilder. So you put the two together, I feel like the momentum that Helenius has from those victories is about to come to a crashing halt against a man like Deontay Wilder, who's about to regain some momentum with a gargantuan knockout in front of the Barclays Center crowd. His team selected Helenius. I feel like they know what they're doing. I'm a big believer in matchmaking. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't think Helenius was a great matchup for Konaski when it was made in the first place. I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking that. I think this is the ideal matchup for Deontay Wilder, a credible opponent where you need there to be some belief that you're not fighting a nobody as you come back and you ask people to spend their money on the fight. But it's a fight that he should win, and people are going to go watch this expecting to see a big Deontay Wilder knockout, and I suspect they're going to get it probably in the first half of the fight.
Interesting. Gargantuan knockout is what is
Deontay
on record.
Other than gargantuan knockouts?
Right. Curran, let's take it home, buddy. Give us your prediction.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you my thoughts on the undercard real quick first. I think this is a must-win fight for both Caleb Plant and Anthony Dirrell. They both have overcome personal tragedy. This is a big moment for them in their careers if they want to be at the top of the division. And I know that there's a lot of bad blood, but it seems like the bad blood is starting from the Anthony Dirrell side. And Caleb Plant saying, hey, he doesn't like me because he knows I'm better than him. And I kind of buy into that. I think Caleb Plant is going to outbox Dirrell, and I see Caleb Plant getting that win. And for the main event, I think it's going to be a fantastic matchup for as long as it lasts. We know Deontay Wilder is back. He's in a good place mentally. I think he's going to be in a good place physically on Saturday night. And we cannot count out Robert Helenius. He's got that Viking blood. He's on a knockout streak. But I think that's going to play into Deontay Wilder's hands. The one big prediction I can definitely make, if you look online right now, over under 4.5 rounds, I'm taking the under. That's to me is a definite. And at the same time, we saw Robert Helenius get knocked out by Gerald Washington. And we saw what Gerald Washington could do to Robert Helenius. I think Wilder is going to do that a few times over. So I expect to see a fantastic, spectacular knockout by Deontay Wilder to re-announce his presence in the heavyweight division.
Well, there you have it, folks. If you were on the fence about whether or not a heavyweight bout was going to generate the kind of excitement that it has in its high days of previous eras, I think this bout this weekend may just satisfy your itch. So, Saturday, October 15th, Barclays Center, Brooklyn, New York, Deontay Wilder and Robert Helenius. Can't wait.